I didn't see you there. Well, I guess it's good you caught me now, because it's time for junior church. Let me put my Bible down. I wanted to show you something. Look at this big book. Some adults might know what this is, but it's pretty thick, isn't it? I'm going to do something with this in a little bit, so you better pay attention and find out why. It goes along with our story today. But first, let's do our memory verse and a couple songs. How's that sound? All right, so we've got Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Oh, wait, we've got some guests that want to help me out with this today, so not really guests, but okay, come on up. Oh, there's 3 heads there. Oh, there we go. Okay, ready? Let's say the verse together. Here we go. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Excellent. Those are the 2 verses we've been working on, right? The last couple of weeks. Just to trust the Lord, especially right now. Okay, let's do a couple of songs. I'm going to tilt the camera down just a little bit and step over here so you can see what we're going to sing. I think you're all familiar with this one. Good thing I've got some help today. All right, are you ready? We're going to sing Untold Millions. Hey, where'd you go? Okay. All right, I'm just going to go down here so we can see everybody. And hopefully we can follow along with the words. All right. And 3, 2, 1, go.
Untold millions are still untold. Untold millions are outside the fold. Who will tell them of Jesus' love and the heavenly mansions are waiting above? Jesus died on Calvary to save each one from sin. Now he calls to you and me to go and bring them in for many. Untold millions are still untold. Untold millions are outside the fold. Who will tell them of Jesus' love and the heavenly mansions awaiting above?
Excellent job. How about one more? How about I love him better every day?
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll come around over here. Sing it together. And then we'll spell it out. We'll see how well your spelling is. Here we go. I love him better every day. I love him better every day. Close by his side, I will abide. I love him better every day. Let's spell it. I love him better every D-A-Y. I love him better every D-A-Y. Close by his S-I-D, I will A-B-I-D. I love him better every D-A-Y. Oh, I can barely hear you there spelling. Okay, excellent job. Thank you very much for your help. Now, let's go ahead and get into our lesson. Okay, I hope you remember what we've been talking about. Esther, right? Queen Esther and Mordecai. And let's see, last week we wanted to find out if the Jews were going to be destroyed, right? I better put this back up a little bit. There we go. Okay, so we left off with they got the letter, they were upset, and Queen Esther was going to go into the king, but we didn't know what was going to happen. So let's find out what happened today. When she went into the king, guess what? That's right. You see it there on the picture. He held out his scepter. And he said it was okay for her to go ahead and come in so that she could talk to him. Alright? So that's good news. Because he could have said, nope. And he could have had her killed. Could have put her to death. Because she wasn't invited by the king to come in. So that's good. He held that out, and she said, I want to invite you to a feast. But not just you, I want to invite Haman. Remember that guy? He's the guy that wants all the Jews to be put to death. He's the bad guy. Right? But she said, I want you and Haman to come to a feast that I'm going to have. So he was pretty excited. That sounded great. And they were enjoying the feast, and the king asked Esther, what is it that you want? I'll give you anything. He even says, I'll give you even half of the kingdom. Could you imagine if somebody said, a king, if he said, I'll give you anything you want, even up to half of what I got. Man, he probably had a whole bunch of stuff. Gold and crowns and nice robes and nice place that he lived in. All kinds of stuff, probably servants and animals and things like that. So he was willing to give her anything, pretty much. But she didn't tell him. She said, I want to invite you to another feast. And then I'll tell you what I want. Because she was trying to do things nice and kind of make everything good so that she could ask to save her people and he would be in a good mood maybe. Right? So, Haman got really proud, right? So he was so proud he thought, my goodness, Esther only invited me to this feast to be with the king. She didn't invite anybody else, just me. So he was pretty proud of it, right? And he went home and he told his wife and his friends. He was really proud, like, oh, look at me. I'm the only one that gets to go to this feast. Now, this kind of gives us a good little lesson here, right? We shouldn't be proud. We should be humble. God says that we should be humble. And God will give us the grace to be humble, okay? He'll give us grace to be humble. We'll look at a verse in a few minutes about that. But first, I want to read you about being humble and what God says. In Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4 says, let nothing be done through strife or vain glory, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem other better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others, right? So you shouldn't be selfish and wanting all these things for yourself, but you should be caring for others. Vainglory, it says there. And it says you should esteem others better than yourself, right? That means you should care for them more. You should be more concerned with them, right? So, that's what the Bible says about being proud. Well, Haman was just the opposite of that. He was pretty proud. He wasn't caring about others. He was caring about himself. So, God will give you grace to be humble. But Haman, oh, he certainly wasn't humble, was he? So, as he walked home, he saw Mordecai sitting at the gate. Mordecai, the guy that he just could not stand, right? And Mordecai was not bowing down to him. He just wouldn't do it. Here he is again. And he just remembered how much he hated Mordecai and how much he hated the Jewish people. And he couldn't wait to get rid of all of them. Right? Well, so when he got home and he's bragging to his wife and his friends about how important he was, this is what he said. In Esther 5, chapter 5, verse 12, he said this. Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther, the queen, did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared, but myself. And tomorrow am I invited unto her also with the king. Wow, he was just loving this, right? He was very proud about this. So he had a pride issue for sure, right? He just cared about himself. But he said this, though, too, after that. He was so happy about it. He said, it didn't matter, though. All these things didn't matter at all because that Jew, Mordecai, is still sitting at the king's gate. You know, he got invited to something nice, and that could have been good for him to just be happy about, but he was so angry about Mordecai that he didn't even care. He just let that anger take over him. So his wife and his friends said, all right, we have a solution for you. How about this? Why don't you come up with a way to have Mordecai killed? Have him put to death. Oof. And they gave him a plan to build something really big. It's called gallows, or it's a big like wooden thing where they would hang people. So they said, yeah, why don't you make one of those? And they said make it really high so everybody could see it. So he thought that was a great idea. He would make these, and the first one that he wanted on there was Mordecai, because he hated him. Now, God says hating people is sin, right? The Bible tells us that hating people is sin. And Haman's hatred, his sin of hatred, caused him to do terrible things. We should not let hatred be in our hearts, because it can cause us to do some really terrible things. We should love people, and we should be kind to people. Now, God was still working, though. Even though he had planned to have Mordecai murdered, really. God was still working, and none of this was happening without God's knowledge. Now, that night, this is a really interesting thing. That night, a couple weeks ago, I told you we had to remember that something was written in the book. Remember back when Mordecai heard those two guys at the gate and they were planning on having the king killed? Well, he spoiled that plan and it got written down in the king's book. Well, this night the king couldn't sleep good. So he called his servant and he said, can you read me the book that I write it, or that has all the records in it? I don't know. Maybe reading something, and maybe it was boring, and it just would help him fall asleep. Sometimes we listen to something like that, and it just, maybe you're bored right now and you're falling asleep. I hope not. You better be staying awake. Quiet, see, check. All right. I hope you're not bored. Anyway, maybe something like that just helped the king fall asleep, because he couldn't sleep good. And guess what? It just so happened, in 12 years of history being written in this book, that servant turned to the page that told about Mordecai and how he saved the king's life by telling them that these guys were coming after the king. But the king didn't know that. Now, hang on a second before we continue with our story. Remember, I said I was going to show you this book? This is the biggest book in my house. So, it's crazy to think that servant could take a big book. Maybe it was bigger than this, maybe it was smaller, I don't know. But it just so happened to go to the page and read that to the king that night to help him fall asleep and tell him that Mordecai was really a hero, right? Now, what I did was I had my oldest son take a little piece of red wrapper or paper or something, and I said, put it in this book anywhere you want. Can't see it. It's kind of an old book, but it's in here somewhere. Now, what do you think the odds would be if that was where Mordecai was, and I just so happened to be that servant, and I just, opened up to that page? Well, that's not it, but I did find a snowflake in here that I didn't know was in here. That's kind of funny. But the red thing's not in there. So let me try one more time. Let's see. Nope. No red thing. Still not there. Boy, what are the odds of finding this thing? Could be crazy. It's in here somewhere. I don't even see it. It might even take me like an hour later just to find it. Oh, there's another snowflake. Look at that. Oh boy, I know what the kids have been using for. No. Found about 6 snowflakes that I didn't put in there, but I can't find that red thing. So, isn't that crazy? It's kind of hard. I think you understand what I'm saying. So he read that to the king, and the king said, wait a minute. What did we ever do for Mordecai? Because he's a hero. God is sovereign. Remember? He's in control. He's the one that caused that servant to open the book and read about Mordecai right at this time where they really needed something positive to happen for the Jewish people. God is sovereign. God's in control. He's the one that caused that. So the king said, what did we do? What did we ever do for Mordecai to tell everybody he's a hero? He saved my life. And the servant said, well, we didn't do anything. That's kind of not very fair, is it? Let me make sure I'm on the right slide. And I am. That's good. So, just then Haman arrived. He had come to get permission to kill Mordecai after he came up with this idea with his wife and his friends. And before Haman could speak, the king said, all right, come in. But he was thinking about Mordecai, right? And he said, hey, Haman, what would you do for a man you wanted to honor? You wanted to make him feel good and give honor to. And Haman got proud. He thought, oh, well, the king wants to honor me because I'm the guy. So he thought the king was talking about him. And he said, well, what I would do is I would get the king's nice robes and put it on that man. And I would put that man on the king's royal horse and ride him through the streets and say, this is the guy I want to honor. He's a great guy. And the king said, that's a great idea. He liked that idea. Now Haman thought he was talking about him though, remember? So what he said was, go ahead and do these things. Hurry up. Do it for Mordecai. What? Haman was humbled at that point. He was embarrassed. Now, the man that he hated, he had to go put a robe on him, put him on the horse, lead him through the streets and say, this is the man that the king honors. And Haman thought that was going to be him. But it's Mordecai, the real hero. So he was pretty upset, right? Now, God ended up humbling Haman. But remember, God gives us grace to be humble. And James 4:6 says, James chapter 4 verse 6 says, but he giveth more grace, wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace to the humble. So he'll give you grace. Just be humble. Be a humble person. Don't be proud. Because it says God resists proud people. He doesn't want people to be proud. Well, in this case, God humbled Haman by what happened here. So, Haman had to obey the king, and he had to honor Mordecai. Boy, that was a terrible thing for him, wasn't it? So, Haman must have been furious about that. He already hated Mordecai, and believed the king should honor him instead. Haman wanted that glory, right? So when Haman got home, he was kind of sad about it, and he told his family and friends again what happened. And you know what they said? They said, guess what? If you're against Mordecai and he's one of God's people, then you're not going to be able to go against that. You cannot defeat a man like that if he is for God. Wow. They knew what was going on, huh? So, well, let's finish up the story here. But I think we're not going to hear it all. There was a knock at the door as he was at the house with his wife and his family. And it was a servant there to bring him to that feast that Esther had invited the king and Haman to. Uh-oh. Well, Haman thought he had already been humbled and embarrassed, right? So what's the worst that could happen now? Well, I guess we'll find out what happens at that second feast next week. But I just want you to remember to be humble, okay? The next time you're tempted to be proud and you think you're better than everybody else, just stop and think about the example that Jesus gave us. He humbled himself and died on the cross for my sin and for your sin. So let's use the example of Jesus being humble, and let's try to be humble like Jesus. That's all for now. Have a good week.